Perhaps our descendants, the disciples of the future, will call this day a day of waiting. But we're not waiting. For us, there's nothing to wait for. All we know is what we were lost yesterday as Jesus died on the cross. For us, it's all over. This is a day of doubt, despair, disillusionment, devastation. Certain details of the killing yesterday are hard to shake. Jesus, carrying his cross on the road to Golgotha, surrounded by women who were weeping for him, and Jesus telling them, "Don't weep for me, weep for yourselves and your children." What did he mean? Was he telling them that the violence spilling out on him was only a trickle of the reservoir that waited behind the scenes to flood the whole region? Then there was Peter, so full of bluster at dinner on Thursday, such a coward later that night, and invisible all of yesterday. And Judas, to think we trusted him as our treasurer. At least the women stayed true. The women and John, who was entrusted with Mary's care as her surrogate son. None of us can imagine what yesterday must have been like for Mary. She has carried so much in her heart for so long. And now this. Then there was that strange darkness, as if the whole world were being uncreated. And there was that strange rumour about a veil in the temple being torn from top to bottom. Was that an image for God in agony, like a man tearing his clothes in fury over the injustice that was happening? Or was it a rejection of the priesthood for their complicity in the crime, a way of saying that God was done with the priests and the temple, that God would welcome people into the holiest place without their assistance? Or maybe it could mean that God is on the loose, that God is through with being contained in a stone structure and behind a thick curtain, and wants to run free through the world like a wind. That's a nice sentiment, but not likely from today's vantage point. Today, it best symbolises that no place is holy anymore. If a murder like this can take place in the so-called holy city, supported by the so-called holy priesthood, then holiness is nothing but a sham. It's a torn curtain, and behind it only emptiness lies. On top of it all, we have to come to terms with the fact that Jesus seemed to know all this was coming. True, at the last minute, just before the betrayal and the arrest, he prayed that the cup might pass from him, but he'd been telling us that something terrible was coming. Telling us since back in Caesarea Philippi, when Peter confessed him as the liberating king and the true leader. Telling us in many ways, even in his parables. Jesus loved life. Yet he didn't cling to it. He loved life, yet he was not controlled by the fear of death. In the garden on Thursday night, it seemed as if to him the fear of death was more dangerous than death itself. So he needed to deal with the fear once and for all. But look where that got him. Maybe it would have been better for him to flee back to Galilee. Lots of other people are living in communes out in the desert, waiting for Jerusalem and all it represents to crumble under its own weight. Maybe that's what we should have done, but it's too late now. That one Roman soldier was impressed by him, but the others, all they cared about was seeing who could win a dead man's garment with a roll of the dice. True to form, playing games and obsessed with clothes and money to the very end. Then came that moment when one of the rebels who was being crucified with Jesus started mocking him. And then the other rebel spoke up to defend Jesus. And Jesus said those kind words to him about being with him in paradise. Even when he had compassion for someone else, even in death, he was kind to a neighbour. And finally there was that haunting moment when he spoke of forgiveness for those who were crucifying him and for us all. Normal sane people would have said, "God damn them to hell forever for what they've done." But not Jesus. They don't understand what they're doing, he said. What did our leaders think they were doing? Protecting law and order, preserving the status quo, conserving what little peace and security we have left, silencing a heretic or blasphemer, shutting down a rabble-rouser and his burgeoning movement. Right up to the last minute, we dared hope that God would send in some angels, stop the whole charade and let everyone see how wrong they were and how right Jesus was. But no last-minute rescue came. Only death came. Bloody, sweaty, filthy, ugly death. Just before he died, it seemed that even he had lost faith. My God, why have you forsaken me? He cried. Maybe some shred of hope remained, though, because his last words were, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Now, he's dead. Does that mean this uprising is dead too? We feel a chill as we realise that possibility. What do we do now? Do we leave, go back home, pick up our lives where we were left them before all this started for us? Do we try to carry on the teaching of a dead, defeated, failed and discredited leader? Do we turn cynical, disillusioned, dark and bitter? Fishing and tax collecting will seem meaningless compared to the memories of these last few years. But that's all we've got left. Fishing, tax collecting and memories. The adventure of Jesus is dead and done. Maybe we've all been fools. Maybe Pontius Pilate was right when he told Jesus that truth didn't matter, only power matters. The power of sword and spear, chariot and crosses, whips and nails. Or maybe the Sadducees and their rich friends in Jerusalem are right. Life is short and then you die, so amass all the money you can, by any means you can, and while you can, eat the best food and drink the best wine, because that's all there is. Wine. That brings us back to Thursday night, there around the table. Remember me, I will not eat of this until? Did Jesus really believe that death wasn't the last word? Did he really believe that there was any hope of? That's too much to believe today. Today we sink in our doubt. Today we drown in our despair. Today we're pulled down in our pain and disappointment. Today we allow ourselves to question everything about the story we've been told. Creation. Maybe God made this world, or maybe it's all a cruel, meaningless joke. Crisis. Maybe violence and hate are just the way of the world. Maybe they're not an intrusion or anomaly. Maybe they're the way things are and the way things will always be. Calling. Forget about being blessed to be a blessing. Today we lie low and nurse our wounds. It's a dangerous world out there. We'd be wise to stay inside and lock all doors. Captivity. Who cares if Moses succeeded in getting our ancestors out of slavery in Egypt? Jesus failed, and there's no Moses for us now. We're still captives, worse off than we were before that crazy Galilean came and raised our hopes. Conquest. If the most violent win and the non-violent are killed, what kind of world is it? Conversation. Today it seems that the skeptics and doubters were right. There's nothing to say except vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Today's lament feels like the only sure truth in all the sacred scriptures. Christ? What Christ? He lives in a grave cold and dead, and with him all our hopes for a better way of life. Let the women prepare to embalm his corpse, if they can find it. Probably the Romans tore it to pieces and fed the fragments to the dogs.